Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2020, round 9 of the season, a brand new circuit, a brand new venue to Formula 1, Mugello. Welcome to the Tuscan Grand Prix Qualifying report. We knew this was going to be a pretty important session. The Tuscan Grand Prix, the circuit Mugello, isn't particularly a circuit that lends itself to plenty of overtakes, and realistically, today's qualifying session was more going to play out like a traditional Monaco qualifying session, or probably a better analogy would be the Hungarian Grand Prix qualifying, where qualifying is going to be crucial. Overtakes are so limited, but they are possible pretty much where you line up on the grid. Bearing in mind a couple of safety cars potentially, is roughly where you're going to finish the Grand Prix, and as such, today's session so crucial for the weekend as a whole. As always, if you're trying to avoid spoilers, then certainly do not watch the video just yet. Go and watch the highlights over on the F1 YouTube channel, or watch the qualifying on Channel 4, whatever. Come back afterwards and we'll go through the result. Spoiler warning out of the way, this is your result for the Tuscan Grand Prix qualifying. An eventful final Q3 session sees Lewis Hamilton claim his 95th pole position in Formula 1, his 4th in a row. And once again in 2020, a Mercedes 1-2, Valtteri Bottas just half a tenth off teammate Hamilton. It was then for the first time in 2020, a Red Bull 3-4, Verstappen once again continuing his incredible qualifying form, but Alex Albon finally getting top 4 in 2020, joining his best ever Formula 1 qualifying result and his best of the season so far. Probably the performance of the day. In behind Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc, Ferrari of course, celebrating their 1000th Formula 1 Grand Prix this weekend. They came into it not expecting anything crazy, kind of fingers crossed really. One of their drivers could maybe squeeze through to Q3, so P5, very respectable indeed. P6 for Perez, P7 for Lance Stroll, not a bad day for the two racing point cars. Ricardo, Sainz and Esteban Ocon rounded out your top 10. For the first time in 2020, Lando Norris didn't get through to Q3, but starting on the alternate strategy isn't an awful thing for the British driver. It's then Danny Kavia out-qualifying Pierre Gasly for the second time in 2020 in P12. Raikkonen ahead of Sebastian Vettel and Romain Grosjean, a really good drive today from Grosjean, getting through to Q2. Gasly, last time's race winner, down in P16, really struggled to get used to that car. A few mistakes in final practice this morning and in qualifying today puts him out in Q1 for the first time in 2020. Giovinazzi 17th, the two Williams 18th and 19th, and Kevin Magnussen dead last in P20. Your grid tomorrow looks like this. It's not quite the same as the qualifying result. It's a 1-2 for Mercedes. Red Bull lock out the second row, but on the third row it's Charles Leclerc joined by Lance Stroll. Sergio Perez being penalised one position thanks to contact with Kimi Raikkonen in practice 2. Daniel Ricciardo is 8th and the final row in their top 10, and row 5, Carlos Sainz 9th and Esteban Ocon P10. Lando Norris on that brand new set of tyres for tomorrow will start on row 6 alongside Danny Kvyat. It's then the old Ferrari duo of Raikkonen and Vettel on row 7, Grosjean and Gasly, the two Frenchmen, row 8, row 9 is Giovinazzi and Russell, and the back of the grid, Latifi and Magnussen. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was a session that was so crucial going into the race tomorrow, and drivers like Norris, Kvyat and maybe Kimi Raikkonen will be benefiting from those alternate strategy and tyres, and that potentially could come into play. But for the most part, we saw it with F3 this morning. Formula 2 is just about to kick off at the moment. Turn 1 appears to be the best place to overtake. Drivers have been brave overtaking in the middle of the circuit, but you've got to put yourself in the seat of those Formula 1 cars and the Formula 1 drivers. Dirty air is going to be a real problem. One DRS zone, strategy is going to be king. However, I think I said this Thursday, may have been yesterday, whatever. we could see a Grand Prix very similar to what we've seen at Hungary in the past, in Monaco, where even though overtaking isn't super duper easy, when we do see it, first of all, they're fantastic, and second of all, we can see some absolute belters of Grand Prix from circuits where overtaking is really, really difficult. So I'm not going to, hate on this circuit too much just yet. We didn't expect this coming into the season, and the fact we're racing here in general is brilliant, and with the F2 cars on in the background at the moment, it is a really, really awesome track. But on to today's results, without going and deviating too much, not a bad session. We'll start off with the back and work our way forwards, because for the most part that back group is very, very similar. K-Mag, for the second time in 3 races, qualifying dead last, seems to have lost that little bit of mojo at the moment, and it's Grosjean who seems to have really swung momentum into his favour, which is a bit of a surprise considering the last couple of years, but nothing too crazy from any of those back drivers really. Grosjean and Raikkonen getting through to Q2, great jobs for those two. George Russell into the gravel, just managed to recover his lap and just beat Latifi. He's now 30-0 in qualifying over teammates. The big shock though in that backpack really, and a driver who shouldn't be anywhere near that backpack, race winner Pierre Gasly. The lap never really came together on his final run. Made a slight mistake, car was really out of shape through turn 1 and just isn't quite on the pace of teammate Danny Kavia. Kavia has had plenty, if not the most experience here of any driver, but still a huge shock to see Gasly out in Q1 considering how consistent he's been all year long, and that car, especially in practice this morning, was looking really, really good. We've also got Sebastian Vettel, who's kind of morphing himself into that backpack at the moment, just has nowhere near the confidence levels needed for that SF1000 Ferrari. Leclerc, of course, qualifying 5th, not quite on merit, so it does make Vettel's performance look that little bit worse. But Seb now, that's what I think 4 or maybe even 5 Grand Prix in a row where he's been not only in that backpack, but not even through to Q3. Big surprise. I mean, we know how bad it is this year, but again, Vettel failing to out-qualify Raikkonen and just in front of Romain Grosjean. We've then got Danny Kavia outside that top 10. Not a bad session from Danny, actually. I did mention earlier that he does have plenty of experience here, but he is a driver who's lacking that bit of momentum at the moment, and he's on the back foot, so that's a really good job for the Russian driver, whose future at the moment is a bit in doubt. And that last driver outside the top 10, Lando Norris, for the first time in 2020, fails to get through to Q3, but I don't think he can be too disappointed with that. The streak he's been on this year has been great, and that alternate strategy could be a real game changer tomorrow. Inside that top 10 then, and we've got to start. That Q3 session was building really, really nicely, and we were kind of robbed a little bit of a fight at the end of this session. Esteban Ocon, who finished P10, failed to set a lap in Q3, made a huge mistake on his final run. I think he only did one run because he only had one set of tyres available, so he used one too many almost to get himself through into Q3 for starters. Made a mistake, almost the exact same mistake as Lando Norris did yesterday in practice 2 on the exit of the second chicane, turn 5 I believe it is. Still getting used to the corner names here at Mugello. Got it slightly wide onto the gravel, lost the rear end, didn't end up in the barriers like Lando Norris, but had to park it up where he was. Not quite sure whether he was told to leave it there or couldn't get going again. No matter anyway. Double wave yellows in the first sector. Every driver behind Ocon wasn't able to set a quicker lap, and it wasn't even as if Ocon was particularly far behind, because the only 3 drivers that were in front of him was Lewis Hamilton, who was already on provisional pole position, Max Verstappen, who couldn't quite take Bottas, and Charles Leclerc, who we'll talk about in a moment. But another solid session from Esteban Ocon, not quite on the level of teammate Daniel Ricciardo. We're kind of getting to that stage of the season now where you'd like him to be a little bit closer, but he's certainly closer than he was in the first couple of races of the season. So you can see progress is still being made, and this is a circuit where potentially tomorrow if he can get nice and racy on that opening lap. We've seen in F2 and F3, they're going 4, if not 5 wide into turn 1. It's opportunities to make plenty of places on that opening lap. Carlos Sainz was able to split the two Renaults. Not a bad session, actually, from Carlos. If you compare that to the rest of the season, yeah, 9th isn't great for McLaren. But when you consider their pace pretty much all the way through practice 1, 2, and especially this morning in practice 3, getting through to Q3 is a great little effort there from Carlos Sainz. And he's mainly focused at the moment, yes, on making sure he can get as many points as he can, but he loves that little inter-team battle with Lando Norris, and he's just been able to one-up his teammate. But again, I think the alternate strategy will help out the likes of Norris and Kavia. So Ricciardo, who we're going to talk about in a second, Sainz and Ocon are all going to have to be aware of that threat coming from behind. And Danny Rick, P8, not a bad job at all. Continuing that consistency we've seen pretty much since day one. I was going to say since the start of this season, but even last year has always been super consistent for Renault. Pretty much always been their best driver since he's been there. Consistently out-qualified Hülkenberg last year. The same's happening this year. Fair play to him. And also, mixed opinions on his helmet this weekend. I actually quite like it, but I think I'm in the minority there. Plenty of special helmets. Norris has got a great one. Vettel, I like his as well. And Charles Leclerc's super awesome indeed. But before we get to Charles Leclerc, the 2 racing points, 6th and 7th, probably would have wanted a little bit more, as in they would have liked 5th and 6th. Looking out that 3rd row of the grid wasn't quite to be, and actually they were quite unlucky not to lock out that 2nd row. Both of them hampered by the Ocon incident, and actually it's really hard to commentate on any of the drivers' performances in the top 10 because none of them really got a great opportunity to show us their best lap, their ultimate performance, because of Ocon's crash. So it's really hard to say, yes, he could have done better. It's not quite where they wanted to be, but hey, 5th and 6th, 6th and 7th. Tomorrow's Grand Prix, Perez will take a 1-place penalty thanks to that contact with Raikkonen. Stroll does have the upgrades on that racing point this weekend, so probably he'll be a little bit frustrated. He's managed to be out-qualified, just picked by his teammate with everything surrounding Sergio this weekend. I bet that's a nice little confidence booster for him. Charles Leclerc, though, P5, what a drive. And we can pretty much leave that there for Charles Leclerc because that car shouldn't be 5th. Yes, he qualified 4th, I believe it was, at the first Silverstone race and on merit qualified 3rd. But this is a very different style of track to the likes of Silverstone. But we've seen it from Leclerc all year long. He does seem to be far more comfortable in that Ferrari. He does seem to make far less mistakes. And to be fair to him, he has been super, super consistent. Certainly up there as one of those drivers of the season. What a weekend to get a great result like this. And hey, if we do see a carnage lap 1, which we have seen for pretty much all of the Junior Series races this weekend, especially turn 1, Leclerc could get in the mix. And if indeed overtaking does prove to be difficult, we saw Bottas drop back massively at the start of last weekend's Italian Grand Prix. If that happens again, maybe, and it's a real outside chance, we could see a Ferrari podium. But I think what's more likely is to see a Red Bull on the podium. 2nd is probably the target for Max Verstappen, and Alex Albon will be targeting that first podium. He's finally qualified in that top 4. That's exactly what he needed to do. On paper, P4 is where he needs to be. Great result. On the timesheets, not exactly ideal, still about half a second off Max Verstappen, and I think today's performance looks better because the other teams were just that little bit too far behind Red Bull, but that doesn't matter. Grid position is king here. He's got the job done on Saturday. If there's any kind of problem in front, whether it's a little mistake from someone, any kind of mechanical issue, this weekend should be Albon's first podium. And I would absolutely love to see Albon get his elbows out on that opening lap, take the fight to Max, take the fight to Valtteri in front, try and make a move, even if he sends it into turn 1, just go for it. Big opportunity for Albon this weekend. And Max continuing that consistency we've seen all year, and the 2 Merc boys up at the front, you expect to see it. It's standard 2020 by now, and poor Valtteri, who's consistently been beating Hamilton all weekend, the opportunity taken away thanks to that Ocon incident. But maybe we'll be able to see a charge tomorrow in the Grand Prix. Before we go then, driver of the day and ones to watch. I think I've already given away who my driver of the day is. I would have loved to have given it to Grosjean or Raikkonen. They were doing a really good job at the back of the pack today, but it's got to be Charles Leclerc with what has been a dismal season, a dismal last couple of Grand Prix, a track which shouldn't really have suited the Ferrari. A little bit lucky with Ocon's incident, but even being so consistent, pretty much 7th consistently before Ocon's incident and nipping up to P5 at the end. Great little result today from Charles Leclerc. And my ones to watch for tomorrow, keep an eye out for Lando Norris. I think that alternate strategy really could play dividends later on in the Grand Prix. Alex Albon, please get your elbows out, son, into turn 1, starting from 4th. Romain Grosjean has been on a real good bit of form at the moment on the quiet at the back of the pack. I'm looking forward to seeing if he can move forward from 15th. And your F1E ones to watch for the first ever Tuscan Grand Prix is your race winner from last time out, Pierre Gasly. He's been so good in 2020. A little mistake caught him out today, but expect him to definitely be moving forward tomorrow. And that is your lot here for the Tuscan Grand Prix qualifying review. I'd love to know your predictions in the comments section down below. Who is your driver of the day? But as always, if you did enjoy and you are new, feel free to subscribe. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, really helped out the channel. Thank you all very much for watching. Enjoy the race tomorrow, and I hope to see you all in the next one.